Hello and welcome to Transfermarkt. My name is Matt and I'm joined by Stefan and Ewan to discuss the future of Manchester United and England winger Jadon Sancho. According to reports in France, PSG have made an offer to Jadon Sancho. Reports in the UK confirm PSG's interest, with Juventus and Borussia Dortmund also keeping an eye on the player. Ewan, let's come to you first and let's talk about Jadon Sancho's place in the Manchester United squad at the moment. Of course, last season he was loaned out to Borussia Dortmund after a falling out with Erik ten Hag. Reports this summer suggested that rift between the two has been mended, but I think we need to look at where Sancho actually is in the pecking order of that United squad.
Yeah, obviously he's back in the squad. He put on the Manchester United shirt again the weekend against Rangers. Many people probably thought that would never happen after his very public falling out with Erik ten Hag. And the Manchester United manager has said that it's all been resolved and he's a very good player, which Jadon Sancho obviously is. But in terms of his future at Manchester United, I think he probably lies about fourth choice. At wing options, you've also got Marcus Rashford, Alejandro Garnacho and Amad Diallo, who I think are all ahead of him in the pecking order. So the issue for Sancho and for Manchester United will be he wouldn't want to be a bench player. He probably sees himself as a better option than probably all those players. And from a Manchester United point of view, they probably don't want a fourth choice winger who's on really, really high wages. So I think if Sancho is not going to be a first choice player, or certainly where he lies in the pecking order at the moment, it does make sense for him to probably leave the club in the summer. I think Dortmund obviously wanted him to go back. The problem with that potential avenue was his wages. I don't think Dortmund could afford to pay what Jadon Sancho is on a week. I don't think Manchester United would want to have to pay part of his wages for him to go to Dortmund. So from that point of view, I think PSG looks like quite a good option. In terms of Sancho, I also think it's quite a good league for Jadon Sancho. I can imagine Sancho going there and being outstanding. An interesting factor in this rumour as well is the fact that Sancho was unbelievably good against PSG in the Champions League last season for Dortmund. There was that one performance where I think every Manchester United fan was watching that performance from Sancho against PSG and thinking, where was this for his 2.5 years at Manchester United? It was incredible. And I think everybody knows he doesn't have that in his locker. He's so talented. His ability to take the ball, manipulate it, play short, sharp passes with players. His skill level is ridiculous. And obviously, from his first spell in Dortmund, his numbers are so good. But I just don't think he's suited to playing in the Premier League, maybe. I don't think he's suited to Manchester United's style of play and the players around him at Manchester United. I don't think they kind of play the same way. So I think if he's not going to be a starter this season, it makes sense for Manchester United to potentially sell him and make some money.
And on the mention of money, Stefan, there surely is a financial aspect here in Manchester United's decision to try and get Jadon Sancho off the books. They're this window already at about a net spend of around 60 million euro. And when you're looking at that squad, if they do need to recoup some money this window, Sancho's probably top of that list.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. If you kind of look through the players that Man United have already moved on this summer, they've done a pretty good job of actually clearing house, to be honest to you. A lot of kind of players, older players, or players just simply weren't playing much football, but in a similar situation to Sancho, were on huge wages without doing a huge amount. Obviously, Anthony Martial's moved on. Excuse me. Rafael Varane is another one who's moved on. 31 years old and really poor injury record, unfortunately, at Old Trafford, but another high earner. He's been moved on. Donny van de Beek finally left the club for a modest fee of 500k. And there's kind of younger players as well who they've picked up decent fees for. 6 million for Carreras, 10 million for Kambwala, and then 26 million for Greenwood, which is a pretty good fee, all things considered. But as you mentioned, that kind of comes to a total of 42.5 million euros, which is considerably less than the 104.5 million they've spent so far. And Man United aren't really under huge financial fair play pressure, but they will want to kind of clear house and pick up as much money as they can because they do have a huge rebuild on hand. We've obviously seen them pick up Euro for a huge amount, Xerxes for a huge amount. We've done videos on both of them recently on YouTube, so you can check that out. But there's a lot of talk about De Ligt being brought to the club, or another central defender in Branthwaite as well. So they still have a lot of money that they probably want to spend. And the interesting thing is, if you kind of look through that squad and the players that have been linked with moves away, you do be kind of dwindle in options. I mean, there's Scott McTominay, good age, good pedigree of Premier League player, but Ten Hag actually came out this week and said that he doesn't want to sell him. So that more or less rules that out. Similarly, Wan-Bissaka is one who's constantly linked with other Premier League clubs, but it only takes 5 minutes to kind of look through that Man United squad to see that they'd be pretty foolish to sell either their first choice or very close second choice right back going into the new season unless they had another player lined up who probably cost even more than Van Bissaka. So that would be an odd move. And then after that, you're then talking about guys like Casemiro, Maguire, Lindelof, players who are also kind of getting on in age who aren't going to demand huge fees. So when you factor all those things into account, Jadon Sancho is one of the few players that are the right age, who isn't getting game time and could demand a decent fee, because obviously a lot of clubs in Europe still think he's got plenty of potential to fill. And as a result, it's quite smart of Man United to obviously moving out to Dortmund. I kind of agree with you, and he had good spells. He didn't have great games. He wasn't, fantastic from game to game, but he showed what he's capable of. And if PSG are willing to match his wages and offer a decent transfer fee, then Sancho might basically be Man United's most sellable asset this summer.
I think what's important to note is that any sale of Sancho would give United almost extra freedom compared to the fee that they command, because you look at the Joshua Zirkzee deal, for example. It was a 40 million euro release clause that the player had, but it was 42.5 million that United paid. And I know the complications from FFP to now what we call PSR. When you buy a player, when you pay over the odds for a release clause, you're most likely spreading that deal out across a number of years. But any sale, such as the one for Jadon Sancho, would all go on the books for this summer. So it does give them a lot more freedom across the next couple of years if that is to happen. Ewan, from a Jadon Sancho perspective, as we mentioned, Juventus and Borussia Dortmund were interested in the player this summer. Maybe they just can't afford the fee or the wages, but if PSG is the club that he's going to end up at, do you think that's the right move for the player?
I think it's a good move. You're going to a club where, I'm not going to say you're guaranteed a league title every season, but you've got a very, very good chance of winning the League One title. And I think the style of play as well will suit Sancho. I think he needs to be in a team who dominate possession. I think when he's on the ball more, that's when he kind of really stands out. He's not good at tracking back. He's not amazing at tracking back. He's the sort of player who wants to get as many touches on the ball as possible to be effective. And when PSG play in League One, they're going to get 60-70% possession in most games. So it's going to suit that kind of his kind of style of play. Obviously, PSG have went quite deep in the Champions League over the last 5-10 years. So there's a real good chance if they can bring in new players, they'll still have ambitions to win that, albeit they've lost kind of their star man this summer in Kylian Mbappe. But that kind of makes room for someone else to come in and take the mantle and really drive him forward. And I think Sancho will have the confidence that he can be that player. Also, if you look at kind of squad list, they probably are short in terms of players on the wing. It's been well documented in Manchester United that Sancho prefers playing on the left, albeit he then went to Dortmund and played on the right, which probably had Erik ten Hag scratching his head. But if you look at the left wing, I think they've got Bradley Barcola, who's a very, very good player. But Sancho's equally as good, on his day, arguably even better. So I think it does make sense in terms of the move. If it happens, I think it's difficult to see him staying at Manchester United beyond the summer if they can get a really good fee for the player. I think it's good that he's back training at Manchester United. He's made amends there at Ten Hag, but I think there's still a little bit of baggage there. There's still a bit of question marks over kind of his long-term future at Manchester United.
Stefan, would this be the right signing from a PSG perspective?
I think it'd be a really interesting one. I think what we have to remember about PSG is that obviously they didn't get a fee for Kylian Mbappe, but they did manage to move on a monumental amount of wages. So in terms of their own kind of FFP rulings or whatever you want to call it, their budget, they'd probably be able to shift a huge amount from the wage bill to transfer fees this summer, and they've only spent, I think, 20 million euros on a goalkeeper so far. So I would be surprised if we see PSG throw quite a lot of money around before the end of the transfer window. And Sancho would be quite a smart signing, I think. I think Ewan's absolutely spot on. I think he would suit Ligue 1. I think what's maybe underestimated about him during his time in Germany is that he did a lot to really, settle into a foreign country, which isn't something that we often see about British players. But he worked really hard to learn the language, so much so that actually when he returned to England, he had almost something of a German accent, which I found was quite funny. So he does really embed himself in these cultures. He's not some prima donna who, will just kind of work with the other English lads or British lads and kind of cut himself off from where he lives. I think he would really kind of like to kind of embrace Parisian culture and what that offers and what the club have to offer. So I wouldn't be worried about him kind of going out there and kind of embracing a new culture and a new club and working in a new league. And I also think, just kind of echo what Ewan said, if you actually look at PSG's starting 11 for next season as things stand, they've got a lot of players. Gonzalo Ramos is kind of chomping at the bit to kind of prove himself as the next best striker there. They've got two outstanding wingers in Barcola and Dembele, but beyond that, there's not a huge amount of depth. They've picked up Kolo Muani, who's cost a lot of money not so long ago, but he hasn't really worked out there. Similarly, Hugo Ekitiki's been moved on, another kind of young striker who was signed a few years ago. He's moved on permanently to Frankfurt. So if you're actually talking about that front three position, you're actually only maybe talking about maybe 4 or 5 players there who can cover those 3 positions. Only 2, maybe 3 of them are proven stars who will really kind of do the job for PSG. And that's before we even discuss the idea of potential injuries to Ousmane Dembele, who unfortunately has been dogged by them throughout his career. So I think if Sancho was to move to PSG and maybe told that he'd have to fight for the left wing or right wing, I still think he'd have a huge amount of opportunity to prove himself against Barcola and Dembele. So yeah, big club, big Champions League club that can afford his wages, and also one that probably is in desperate need of a winger next season.
I think for Sancho, the pressure of playing with PSG, the only thing that can make it worse is having to fill the boots of Kylian Mbappe. But let us know in the comments if you think Sancho is going to make the move to Paris this summer. Hit the subscribe button down below if you want more content like this throughout the summer. Hit the like button if you have enjoyed this chat. But as always, thanks for watching.